my name is Rennis. This is my panel using board games, video games, and role-playing games to teach and further theater practices, aka I need a shorter title. If you can think of a better one, please. I am open to all title changes. This is also a reminder that I have not had to make a PowerPoint presentation since I was in high school, so I did the best I could. I've been doing theater since I was about 10 years old, professionally, semi-professionally, in all aspects as a director, actor, singer, dancer, technician, stage manager, you name it, I've probably done it. And this kind of led to this. I was in college and I needed to do my senior project, and everyone else was doing cabarets and one-man shows, and I was like, none of that really, everyone's doing that. And I'd gone to a panel at the Southeastern Theater Conference in 2011, maybe? And a guy who was developing video game theater. I don't remember a lot of it. I took a bunch of notes. I can't find them. But I remembered it in my senior year of college, and it kind of led me, well, we were playing D&D or something one night, and it kind of led to the two crossing paths. I was like, oh, I could totally do a research. So this is a 100% completely original thesis. I've never come across any of it before. If anyone has, I would love to know and talk to those people. The big question is why? I want to help actors grow and reach new actors in a different way than the 4-year, 6-year, 7-year programs. You're going to hear a lot of personal stories, so a lot of this is coming from my own experiences and learning about all this stuff as I've kind of come up through the industry. And I hope to help us and hope actors to become better actors, but also players to become better players, dungeon masters, everything, by using actual techniques that we use on the stage, behind the scenes and stuff, to kind of become better at our craft. So I'm going to talk about 3 parts of a much larger, it's about a 100-page thesis. I'm going to talk about 3 things today: board games and ensemble building, co-op video games and communion, and the title of the 3rd part is Acting is a Fiasco. So, first, board games and ensemble building. Now, what do I mean by ensemble? We've all heard, a lot of us have heard the term ensemble as like everyone else who is not the lead or supporting actors or any of that. When I talk about ensemble here, I am talking about the collective body of actors putting on a show. And that can even include technicians, director, stage manager, everyone who is actively working on said production. What makes a good ensemble? And now there's going to be some opinion here, but there are things that I have found that kind of flow through several of my experiences. What makes a good ensemble? Understanding the material is, I think, number 1. If someone's doing a show and they're not quite understanding why they're doing it, what's going on, it can lead to poor performance. It can lead to a fractured ensemble. Understanding their role. We've all heard the term, if you've been in theater, there are no small parts, only small actors. That is, I think, false. There are small roles, but every role has its role. It is there for a reason. It's your job as an actor, performer, theater practitioner to commit fully to that role. Trust among an ensemble is one of the biggest ones. If you can't trust the people you're on stage with, if something goes wrong, there's something not happening. And unspoken trust, not a fractured ensemble. This also, I think, can lead to a really, really good adventuring party when it comes to like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. If you don't trust the people you're sitting at the table with, you're a little bit more hesitant. You are not fully giving over to the given circumstances that your dungeon master, director, is giving you. So why is ensemble building necessary? Ensembles carry the show. some of the absolute best shows I've seen have been with ensembles who know their role, who are physically living in this moment, in this world that you're creating, that they are creating, and the directors of it and designers have all created for them. They can really put a show over the top. A really good ensemble can make the difference between an okay show and a show that I really want to see again, because these are people living in the moment. These are people who are have fully committed. It's also going to make for a better adventuring party, or if you're role-playing games and stuff. If you give over to those given circumstances that your dungeon master or games master is giving you, and live in that moment, you will have a much better time, I promise. We all have had that. Heck, some of us have maybe even been that person in the party who decides they want to do their own thing. That is completely fine, I think, to a point. This is also 100%, for those of you just joining us, my opinions in a lot of this and my research. A strong ensemble blends together. They don't what's called pulling focus. There is a fine line between living in those given circumstances and overdoing it to where you are pulling focus from what the audience needs to be watching. So by having a ensemble who is all on the same page, living in these circumstances, everything blends together. You get lost in that world. So why theater games? Why not theater games, you might say, versus board games? I'm going to be the first person to tell you I hate theater games. I completely understand why they are there. They are there for young actors. They are there as icebreakers. They are there to get them comfortable moving about stage. I'm not saying they do not have their place. There comes a point, I think, as actors, theater practitioners, that we move past a lot of those theater games. Like, we've all played, I mean, most of us have played Zip Zap Zop. Like, so Zip Zap Zop is a zap. Thank you. So you just keep the pattern going. You say something back and forth. It is a connection exercise. It is working with each other. It's really good as a warm-up, I think, to connect with your fellow practitioners before a show, before a rehearsal. But when it comes to ensemble building, I argue that board games are a more efficient and a better way of getting an ensemble more comfortable with each other, more comfortable making decisions in front of one another, more collaborative. Theater games, I think, also trick you a little bit. It's sort of like, I had an example. So how do I want to put this? They're not giving you I don't think all the time giving you the skills that you need on stage. They're not, this is hard to explain. They're teaching you how to improv, but the second you go onto stage and something bad happens and you have to improvise to get back on track, I don't think theater games prepare you for that moment. I think that they prepare you to ad-lib in the background when something is going on. I don't think they necessarily teach you how to live improv, because so many times they get so ridiculous. Improv games get ridiculous, and it's fun and it's great, but that can't always happen on stage. Like, you don't want it to be funny if someone goes up in, like, say, the Scarlet Letter. It's not a ha-ha funny time to ad-lib. It is I need to get back on track. I need to live in this moment. I need to tell the story. So how to use board games? I'm going to use an example. Has anyone ever played the board game or heard of this board game, Zombicide? Perfect. So for those of you who don't know, Zombicide is a cooperative board game. Cooperative board games have become very, very popular, especially over the last couple of years. There's a large trend in co-op and solo board games. But you are a group of survivors in a zombie apocalypse who each has a character. You each have a role. You each have different things that your character can do. And you are working together for a common objective. Just like in a show, you are working together for this to tell this story that you have been given. You are given everything in a book, and the audience knows nothing. So between your director and the entire production staff, whether you're on stage, behind stage, it is your job to convey what is happening in this 60 to 75 to 100 page little tiny book in 2 hours to a group of strangers. If you are not on the same page with everyone or most everyone in the production staff, it can be very obvious and very apparent that that person has no idea what they're doing. They don't know. They're doing something else. They're looking off in the corner while everyone's watching the trial. Now, if that's a character choice, that's fine. And we're going to talk a little bit about, I just got to keep sorry, I'm just checking time. Great. Clear choices, not vague choices. Those can make a huge difference. But Zombicide, you're working together. The first time I played the game, we all just kind of did our own thing. I'm going to go here. Okay, cool. I'm going to go over here. Okay, I'm going to try busting this door open. Okay, I'm going to try and fight these zombies. And we failed miserably. If you ever play Zombicide, at least the first edition, I haven't played the second one, the first campaign mission is by far the hardest. It is so difficult, and we lost terribly. The second time I played it, we talked about everything that we were doing. Okay, I'm going to go over here. Okay, I'm going to go support you because if you go by yourself, you're going to die. Okay, while you guys do that, we're going to stay back and we're going to do this and we're going to do this. Okay, if you're going to do that, I'm going to do that. And we beat it pretty easily. It was night and day. Group of strangers, still a group of strangers. One of us talked it out, one of us didn't. If a group of strangers decides to get together and do a show, and so in Shakespeare's time, the reason it was called a roll is because you got a scroll. All you got, they don't really know, but the theory is that all you got was the 3 words before your line, your lines, and the 3 words after it. That is it. Then they would still get together, go through the whole show, and put the show together. Now, we do that nowadays, sort of. We all get our lines, but we all get the whole script. It makes it much easier to be on the same page. We have discussions. We talk about, well, my character, I'm feeling this. How does that make you feel? And we have a conversation. And we discover this show as we go through it, as with the director. I don't really know what we're doing here. Okay, well, the director's job kind of to guide where we're going, much like a dungeon master. Their job is to let the players create these characters and these stories, but guide them, keep them on task. We've all been, if you've played Dungeons & Dragons, we've all been a part of groups. We might have been that person that the group falls apart very quickly because no one is going towards the common objective, or the common objective that the collective has decided upon. If an ensemble doesn't do that, if an actor, quote unquote, goes into business for themselves, well, this is all about me, this is all about my character's wants and needs, and I don't care about anything else, it completely can ruin a show. The unwillingness to cooperate and create and tell the story can destroy a show. And by using these board games to build these connections, it's really hard when you're working with someone who you've never met before on stage. It is insanely difficult. Hi, and it most always begins with, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm so-and-so. Nice, now let's do this scene. Instead of doing theater games, to break that ice, I would pose that we use cooperative board games to break that ice for several reasons. It's not really putting anyone on the spot. That's another reason I don't like theater games, is because they can put people on the spot. Yes, we're actors, we're theater practitioners. That's what we do. But it can be weird amongst a new group of people. By using a board game, something that they may not have done, someone might have done, we're all learning together. We're all having this 2-hour experience together. So what type of board games can you use? I typically like to keep, these are just several examples with cooperative board games. There's one up here I will quantify. You can use any board game. Just breaking the ice, getting to know each other, and build those relationships make your on-stage work way better, in my opinion. Co-op games especially, because we are all working towards a common goal. The one I do have on here, it is called Letters from Whitechapel. Has anyone played Letters from Whitechapel? Great. One person plays as Jack the Ripper. The other 4 to 5 play as cops searching for them. The thing is, Jack the Ripper, his movements are all hidden, and the others are trying to find him on this map. I pose that if you would use Letters from Whitechapel, the director plays as the most experienced person plays as Jack the Ripper. I've seen this game played several times. I've played Jack the Ripper a lot. When they work together, it makes it really hard for Jack. If they do their own thing, it's going to be 90 minutes of Jack running around the board, making them look like fools. So it forces them to work together. Board games can force people to work together without them knowing it. That's the beauty of it. They're playing a board game, but they're breaking down those barriers, they're breaking down those walls without having any idea by playing just a board game. All right, but you can use any board game as an icebreaker. I think they're great. The second part, I'm going to talk about co-op gaming and communion. And when I say communion, I will talk about that in a minute. It is not the religious kind. One of the basic rules or lessons we are taught in theater is acting is reacting. Example, A does to B, B reacts, B does to A reacts. That's acting in a nutshell. There's an interesting phenomenon that when this is achieved, we as characters are living in this moment and we are reacting genuinely, but in the back of our heads, we know that this is all fake. And we are so conscious of what is happening, but we're still living in this moment, in believing in these given circumstances. This is when we participate in what is called active listening. If my acting partner is supposed to yell at me at this certain point every single time in the show, it only makes sense for me to react accordingly. Maybe let's say it's yelling back. Let's say one night they decide to not yell it at me. Well, I could yell back, but it doesn't make sense at that time. By listening to what is actively happening to you and reacting in a genuine fashion, it is almost always a beautiful moment. It may not be the right thing to happen, but by being more genuine, it's arguably a better decision. I was in a show, if any musical theater fans, awesome, I got a couple. I did Bonnie and Clyde by Frank Wildhorn about 3 years ago. I played Clyde Barrow, and this wonderful actress played my Bonnie. And we were so in tune with each other. We knew the material well enough. We had done all of our outside work. every show was different, but in a correct way. Every show felt fresh. And that's because we were in this state of communion. And what do I mean by communion? It's not the religious kind. It is when two or more actors are in a state of trust, observation, and harmony. As gamers, we kind of refer to, I equate this to almost as the state of flow. Has everyone heard of flow? Yeah. Okay. So for those, flow, I think I have it is a mental state of operation in which the person is fully immersed in what they're doing. Playing a video game, you play for 6.5, 7 hours because you've reached this state at which you are genuinely reacting and completely immersed in these given circumstances, in this game, in the choices you have made, in the character. This is especially true in a good RPG that you can choose your own path, essentially. If you make a decision at the beginning and you follow through with those decisions, you just don't randomly say, you know what, I've been good this whole time, I'm going to kill this person. And then the game suddenly feels a little out of whack. There's a reason for that. The same thing happens on a stage. If you decide that your character's wants and needs are this, and you have to do this and this, and all of a sudden, for no reason, you decide to do something differently, it completely fractures the communion between you and your fellow actors or actor or whoever. Two examples. Resident Evil 5. Has anyone played Resident Evil 5? Okay. People hate it. I love it. I don't care. I think it's a great co-op game. I have a blast when I play it. But same thing. 2 different times I played it. Once with a good friend of mine, Sean. We tried to play it one time in college, and both off doing our own thing. And we beat the game, but it took so long. It took weeks. Because one of us would do something, and one of us, hey, I need you over here. Oh, I'm over here doing this. I need your help. Well, I'm not near you. So we both die. The other time I played it was with my best friend at the time. His name was Josh. We played it. We did not have to communicate. We were right there when we needed each other in the game. There was almost no communication. We sat there, we played the game, and we blew through it in about 10 hours. Very different experiences. But we were in a state of communion. We were trusting each other. We also were not being selfish with our own wants and needs. As actors, I think we get very caught up in what our characters and our egos need and want. If you give over, as actors, and anyone really, if you give over as players in D&D to your given circumstances, if you give over to your character's wants, needs, objectives, and you play those, and you work together with your fellow adventuring party, play your character. I'm not saying, I'm a bad guy. Play that, but play it into the story. Don't just be chaos for chaos' sake. I promise you will have a better experience. Even if I've been a part of the Dungeon Masters who didn't know anything about DMing, but because we listened and gave over to their circumstances, we worked together, we played our characters honestly, we had a blast. It might not have been the greatest game of Dungeons and Dragons or Dragon Age or what I'm about to talk about, Fiasco, but the experience was much better because of it. By giving over to those things and being in that communion and listening, actively reacting, and actively listening, we all had a much better time, at least in theory. Testing this is very difficult because if you tell them, hey, I'm testing this theory, it completely ruins it. I've just had to kind of learn this and take notes much, much later. So, now the big one. Did I get to everything? Oh, the Meisner. Meisner. Okay, so this is Meisner is Meisner is a lot. Meisner is very much about actively listening, actively reacting, coming to an emotional reality. I'm going to get to him a lot in this part. So this is part 3. This is the big one. Acting is a fiasco. So there is a fantastic, it is an early GM-less or DM-less game. This was back when you had to have a DM. It is called Fiasco. If you have not played Fiasco, I don't care who you are, buy a copy, either this one or the board game / card copy, because it's much easier. This is one of the greatest gaming experiences I've ever had. Every time I play this, I can remember every time I've played this. I can remember in vivid detail what happened. I can remember the reactions that I have had. This does not get enough credit for what it can do for gaming and theater practitioners. So, what is it? How do you play it? So, it's even called Act 1 and Act 2 and scenes. This is built for theater people. So, I'm going to give you the elevator pitch written on the back of the book first. Fiasco is a game inspired by films like Blood Simple, Fargo, and A Simple Plan. During a session, you and your friends will engineer and play out stupid, disastrous situations that exist in the darkly comic intersection of greed, fear, and lust. It's like making your own Coen Brothers movie in about the same amount of time it would take to watch one. 3 to 5 players and 2 to 3 hours, roughly. It will probably, the more players, if you play with 3 people, 90 minutes. If you play with 5 people, buckle in. You're in for 3 or 4 hours. And that's just because every time we play it, we get lost in it. So, how do you play it? So, 3 to 5 players. You can't play with anything less. You can play with more, but you're adding a lot of time on for every person past that. So you're going to get, with this version, you will need 2 sets of dice. It does preferably 2 separate colors. A good and a bad pile. You're going to roll all of those dice, and then using those, there are tables in this book, like locations. You will pick a location using, let's say I roll a 1. Okay, I'm going to use that as the Poppleton Terrace, this one here. You're going to set that aside. Then the next person can either choose a location, solidifying it, like a house with a fenced-in yard on a Breezeway Avenue, the gazebo in Poppleton Park. Kind of more and more, and this is where the decision, when I talked about earlier, making clear decisions, not vague decisions, that will help so much when playing role-playing games and as actors. You go around the table, you pick things like items, relationships. You have a relationship with the 2 people on your left and right. Those are who you're going to start interacting with. That doesn't stop you from interacting with the other 1 or 2 people. But you build this relationship, or you can define that relationship. More of a clear choice using these dice. Then you do Act 1. Let's say we're playing with 3 people. You each have, I believe, 2 scenes. I'm going to choose to either establish the scene, which, okay, this is my character's want and need. This is what I'm trying to do in this scene. And you will, and then you get the die. You give yourself the die, whether it's going to go good or bad. If I'm establishing it's going to go good for me, I'm going to get the die, the good die. Or I can resolve, where we just start the scene. This is what I need to happen. This is what I want to happen. And the rest of the people playing are going to resolve it for you. Like, oh, this isn't going well, so you're going to get a bad die. So this goes bad for you. And you see that halfway through the scene, and you act accordingly. This is all improvised. Using your your wants, your needs, your relationships, you play into that. You have to. This game can be this can be a drag if people just don't give over. I will say this. This game has also always been good once everyone has had a drink. Anything more than a drink or two, it gets rough. But just to kind of lower that internal editor, one of the hardest things when I started playing D&D was the DM said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, what do you mean, what do I want to do? Well, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? I could not wrap my head around the freedom that I had. This is kind of a little better because it at least kind of gives you a path. How you go down that path is completely up to you. In Act 1, whenever you're given a die, you give it to someone else. Then, once half the dice are gone, you get to the tilt. You're going to roll those dice, and something terribly wrong is going to happen. In one of them, the item that we had chosen, it took place in 1973. We were at the Kennedy Center for a play, and there was a bunch of backroom politics happening. We had chosen the nuclear football, the nuclear launch codes for the United States of America. The tilt happened. The nuclear football went missing. And that screwed a lot of people's plans up. In Act 1, you're going to make a lot of very big plans for yourself. In Act 2, they're going to go to hell. It happens every time, and it is a blast. In Act 2, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to go back around. You're going to keep the die you were given this time. At the end, you will roll all the dice, and then there is a table that's going to tell you how good or how bad it is going to go for you. And then let's say you have 4 dice. You're going to go one at a time and build this little montage at the end of the movie, essentially, to see how bad it goes for you. You can tell these in flashbacks, but it has to end bad for you. I could talk about this game for 4 hours, easy. So, how can I use this as an acting exercise? This is going to force you to play your wants, needs, and objectives. If you don't, it ruins the game because you have built these relationships, you have built this world with the other people in it at the table. If you don't play your needs and objectives and you decide to do something else, everyone's going to be mad at you because you've decided you're not going to play the game by the rules. It's all improvised. Every single thing is improvised, but it is also almost always a collective decision. You'll have the scene. You'll get done the scene, and you'll step back. You'll be like, wow, that did not go well for me. But it makes sense because my character wants this. My character makes a lot of very big plans. He doesn't think. You just naturally... I've seen people who've never acted a day in their life. And we all know there's people in role-playing game groups who... They play games, and they're very good at it. They don't realize they're just acting. But they've just created this character, and they know all this stuff. They don't realize that what they're doing, a lot of people do on stage for 2 hours, and they've had less rehearsal. The collective decision. This is also another great ensemble game because you all decide what you build the show in front of you. You pick. There are dozens upon dozens upon dozens of play sets for this. And most of them you can find for free online in PDF form. So it's extremely accessible. I do argue that for new, like if you're trying to get a people who have never role played a day in their life, there's a board game version of it now that have cards. It simplifies things. There's also something really cool I like in the board game version that is called the Don't Go There card. As in theater, there has been a movement for the good about more and more and more and more and more consent, especially amongst, especially in those highly emotional scenes when there is intimacy or violence. It is all about consent in those moments. In the board game version, there is a card everyone gets that says, oops, don't go there, or something. I can't remember exactly what the card says. But at any time, you can, like, if something starts to bring up, if someone says something or something you're not just quite comfortable with, and they may not mean it, it might be serving the story, but you just aren't okay with it, it doesn't make you comfortable, it's triggering to you, you can just play that card and then go back and collectively decide, okay, well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Let's talk about where we can go from here. So there is a consent much more. Now, when playing the dice version, you can obviously set up a house rule to do that. This was written in the early 2010s, maybe even earlier than that. So there has been that kind of more and more emphasis on consent. This game helps coming to an emotional reality. Sanford Meisner, probably my preferred methodology of acting, was all about coming to an emotional reality. That's what I learned in college. I went to Fairmont State University in West Virginia, and we were a Meisner school. Coming to an emotional reality is one of the hardest things for me. Always has been. Until I played this game. Changed my life. 2 separate occasions. One time we had established that the woman who was next to me, we were in a relationship, and at some point in the game, my character was going to find out that she was pregnant with my child. Me, Rennis Carball, knew that. I knew that was coming. At some point in the game, we had established it, we had talked about it, we went with it. She dropped that bomb on me in a scene. I was speechless. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. Rennis knew it was coming. The character, I was so in the character and giving over to those circumstances and reacting to what was happening, I completely lost it. It was a real, honest moment. We've seen them, maybe not to that extent, but we do see them I always go back to Dungeons and Dragons because it's the mainstream one that I can talk about. A lot of people have heard about D&D. Even as directors, I recently played through Curse of Strahd, and one of the characters died, and it was like the whole room deflated. They knew it was coming because I had talked to them about it. But when it happened and we were in game and they were playing their characters, it was like I kicked a puppy. But probably it was worse. It was a beautiful moment that I got to witness and they got to experience because they all gave over to their characters. They all gave over to the circumstances. They invested in what was happening in the book as we can do on the stage. The other time, one of my absolute best friend in the world, I was his best man in his wedding. He's my best man in my wedding. His name's Andrew. We have been friends since we were 4 and 5 years old. I'm 30 now. But we were playing this game, and we got into an argument in-game, in character. It almost came to blows. We were yelling, screaming at each other. And we finished the scene. We both sat down, and we breathed. Like, that was intense. That whole game, I wrote a separate post on it. Was an incredible, that was the game that the emotional reality stuff clicked for me. I was in my 4th year in college, and I had struggled with it for 3.5 years. I took a class in my sophomore year, second semester of my sophomore year, all about coming to an emotional reality. I think I left crying. Out of 14 weeks, I probably left crying tears just because I couldn't get it. I was so frustrated, at least 10 weeks. And this game completely changed that. I am a better actor and theater practitioner because of this game. That's when it all clicked. That these games that we play nonchalantly can alter our methods as theater practitioners and can help alter and guide people in the theater acting film world. This game also forces us to be very specific with our objectives and needs. As a director, I'm always asking my actors, okay, what is your want and need here? Well, I want to leave. Why? Why is today different? Was one of the things that when we're watching when we're watching a show or analyzing a show or a play or a script or whatever, the question that you can ask yourself is, why is today different? Why of all days am I watching or reading this 2-hour thing today? What happened? If we are vague, it makes for a boring existence on stage. If I as an actor can be as specific as possible, whether you're conscious of it or not, it will change your performance on stage. 100%. Vague choices are the death of many a show, especially if you don't know the show. If you're going into a show that you've never seen and you're not quite sure why this person is doing that, I would wager to say that the person portraying the character was not directed well enough, because the director is the one who has to know all. The dungeon master. If they don't know what they're if the dungeon master doesn't know what they're trying to get you to do, how can I ask you to know what you're going to do? That's why it's important that we as dungeon masters and games masters have our decisions made in a clear, we make a decision, we are clear about it. We have to improvise sometimes because I've set up 2 hours worth of game and you guys want to go to the pub and chase a cat. That's fine. They're making that decision. We have to, as dungeon masters and games masters, have to live in those circumstances. It is a give and take. Some of the worst games of D&D I've ever been in have been where the dungeon master is in control 100%. There's no straying the path. There's no freedom of choice. It is simply an illusion of choice. So, I'm going to have some time for, I wanted to have some time for questions, so I'm going to get through this real quick. Why? Why use these things instead? Why equate these things together? I think that as teachers of theater, we get really, really, really wrapped up in the Stanislavskis and the Meisners and the Uta Hagens and the this and the vernacular and the methodology and the theory, because that's what we've done for 80 years. It's time to start to move away from that a little bit and look at different ways to do it. We've been teaching the same. That's another reason it's like theater games. Well, we've been playing this game for 10 years. Okay, that's great, but let's evolve. Let's figure out something else. Let's get together on a night that we don't have rehearsal, on Monday night, and hang out, play a game. And they're as a director, you know what you're doing. You're like, yeah, this is just a joke. I mean, this is a ploy to get you to play this game, and then you explain to them. Later it's like, well, you played that game and you had no problem giving over to the circumstances you were given as this character. Oh, you know what? You're right. I didn't. It simplifies it. I think there's a place for this, especially in college and in late high school. Once the foundations have been laid, I think there's also this, if you talk to a 14, 15, 16-year-old about video games and how it relates to their craft, if that's their interest, it melds the two together. It's not as difficult as explaining communion, like I tried to do. When I explain with flow and how it can work, it makes a lot more sense. And I think it's important that we use our passions. This is board games, video games, nerd culture is a passion of mine. Theater is my other passion. And any way that I can get people to understand one or the other using the other is fantastic for me. I absolutely love it. And if it can help someone the way that this game helped me, I'll do it every day of the week. That is all I have. That's all that on my list. Does anyone have any questions or anything for me about anything I've talked about, any methodologies, anything? Yes, sir.
I have a few questions.
Sure.
First question is a general acting question about acting and reacting. So in real life, when someone yells at me, I get an emotional rise and my nervous system gets on fire.
Sure.
And then I give an authentic response back to them. When you're acting and someone yells at you, do you need to authentically and vulnerably let some of that negative energy in so you can give an authentic response to hurt itself?
So I think knowing your how you react to it, and knowing how your character reacts to it. There's a big thing about I had it in my notes, I skipped over it, but knowing how close to the chest, to the vest is what my acting teacher said. How close to the vest you are to the character you are portraying. I love playing villains because I like to humanize them. A lot of people just think, oh, I'm the villain, I'm bad. Why are they bad? What caused it? Why do they think? I played, if you're familiar with the show Cabaret, I played Ernst Ludwig. He is a Nazi. He is a terrible human being. But I had to know, I could play him that way. I can play him as a complete piece of garbage, which the Nazis were. But they got caught up for a reason. What did he connect to? Now, I'm not a Nazi. I will never be a Nazi. I think they're literal human garbage. But I know what it's like to get caught up in something. I know that stupid group mentality. So, yeah, well, I'm never going to be a Nazi. I do kind of understand how I get caught up in stupid stuff and doing stupid things. So knowing your true north and knowing why they are like that, you can make those kind of connections. So, you can react in a more natural way to the character or person or story you are telling.
Second question, what does Fiasco do differently from other games?
So Fiasco, it was one of the first ones to not have a dungeon master or games master. It is purely collaborative. And when this came out, there weren't many of that. You had a dungeon master. You had someone running the game. You lived in their world. With this, you live in a world that you and your cohorts create. And collectively, there is no games master. I will pose that the games master is the story itself. Everything is in service to telling the story that you and your friends or whoever have created. That's what's beautiful about theater. The best pieces of theater are ones where it is definitely a collaborative effort, that everyone has surrendered to the given circumstances and telling the story. Why are we telling this story? What makes today different? In some cases, we get that answer. When we do the Diary of Anne Frank, that's the reason why we do it. When we are given shows like The Good Woman of Szechuan by Bertolt Brecht, I don't recommend Brecht. He's very, very... each of his shows are they're epic theater. They're about 4 hours long, at least. There are some, but we find out, why are we doing this? What is the story? Why are we, what makes today different? What is the lesson we can learn? What is the, those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it, stuff like that. Why? He does have my favorite quote. It is what I sign all of my emails with. Art is not a mirror to hold up to reality, but a hammer with which to shape it. Is my absolute favorite quote when it comes to theater and art as a medium. And I think it's 100% true. Just a little side note. Bertolt. So I think with art, it is as artists, it is our job to be not only the mirror. So we show, we do these shows that show these terrible things that happened in history. But those who, like I said, who do not study history are doomed to repeat it. If we don't do those uncomfortable shows, if we don't show those uncomfortable moments and making an audience uncomfortable or really think about what they're seeing, I think we're doing a disservice. It's, depending on show, like Oklahoma is not going to, the original Oklahoma is not going to shape reality. You know what I mean? I think as we get into the medium and it is a constantly evolving thing, I think art is, I think people, and I think it is an easy way. People don't realize Netflix is art. Everything on there is art. Movie, film, theater, TV, it's all art. Print, it's all art. So by using the things that we have that people don't think about as art, it makes them think. It's kind of like playing these games and stuff. You don't know that I'm doing an acting exercise on you. By watching this movie, you don't know that you're getting this. You don't immediately think about this this thing that's happening or the social thing that's happening. It's kind of a let's call it a Trojan horse of sorts. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. I have about 5 minutes left. Does anyone have any other questions? Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining. Thank you folks so much for joining us. Hope everyone had a good MAGFest. You can find me, Rennis Carball, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. If you have any other questions, if you want to discuss this further, I'm probably the only Rennis Carball on there. Thank you guys so much for spending your last hour of MAGFest with me. Everyone, please be safe, and I'll see you next year.